get us started. Welcome everyone to the Pollinator Site Prep and Seeding Workshop. As you can see, I've been dropping some links here in the chat. One is to our newsletter sign up form, and then another is to our free seed reservation form sign up, which you'll hear me talk about in just a little bit. This event is a part of Lake County Conservation District's larger pollinator initiative, and we began this program back in 2016 to help increase pollinator habitat in Lake County. And we've been trying to do that by providing all of you a free pollinator seed to grow habitat, and also just educate community members and provide technical support and assistance about those plantings. In addition to this program, we are excited to announce that we are developing a new urban pollinator initiative. This program will be a cost share, which means that Lake County will cover some of the costs of native shrubs for community members who want to plant them in their yards. And shrubs are just a wonderful resource for pollinators, and once they get established, can sometimes even require less maintenance and water than the wildflowers do. So please follow us to stay up to date on that if you are interested. Tonight, we are joined by Kathy Settevendemie, who will talk about various methods of site prep, seeding techniques, and just the overall benefits to these kinds of plantings, and kind of what you can do to keep the longevity of your native wildflower pollinator plot. Kathy is a native plants consultant who co-owned the Blackfoot Native Plants Nursery in Potomac, Montana, which is just east of Missoula. Along with her husband, Michael, they started that back in 2003. The goal of the nursery was just to preserve native Northwest Montana and Rocky Mountain plants from hand-collected seeds for folks. And Kathy and Michael are now retired from growing plants after 15 years, but they are still offering consultations to those that are interested in planting native Western Montana species in their landscapes. Kathy has given several talks and presentations at a number of Audubon Wildlife and Native Plant Society meetings, teacher workshops, local nurseries, and state conferences. She regularly teaches classes through the Lifelong Learning Center in Missoula on gardening and landscaping, and leads workshops at the nursery in Potomac. And Kathy also provides a number of other wonderful forms of education and information about native Montana plants. Before I hand it over to Kathy, I just want to let you all know that we will be taking questions at the end, but feel free to put questions either in the Q&A box, typically located at the bottom of your screen, or the chat box. I'll be looking at both. You'll notice when you leave the Zoom that it'll send you to a little survey. We would love your feedback and suggestions for future talks. So Kathy, if you are ready to go, feel free to get started.
All right, thanks. Well, hello, everyone. I'm really pleased to see you here, and I have a presentation for you that I'll just see if I can do a screen share and get that on. Almost. There we go. I'm hoping that you can now see this. If you're having any technical difficulties with this, or if you maybe even need some help with the Zoom, I'm sure that Abby can help you on the chat if you have questions. So we're going to zoom right through this. Tonight, I really want to, first of all, commend you for participating in this program. If you haven't yet signed up, I encourage you to do so. The pollinator plots have many benefits for you as well as the pollinators. And one of them, I think, is allowing us to really observe up close what is around us, to really get in touch with the natives around us, the pollinators, the butterflies, the bees, the moths, many of the different creatures that are around us. Having pollinator plots is a really incredible way to provide corridors or ways for pollinators to travel and traverse the landscape. Every little plot becomes a little habitat where they can land and find sustenance. So it's a really important piece of the puzzle to have small gardens that can do that. As I just mentioned, we provide habitat for pollinators by providing these plots. It's not only providing nectar and pollen for them, but also providing foliage, the areas even beneath the plants where they can winter and find just places to hide, places to lay their eggs, places to reside. So doing pollinator plants is a fun experience, but it does take a little bit of time to establish. This is not going to be like you just sort of throw the seeds in and then instant gratification, they all come up and it's all beautiful. That is to say that it won't be beautiful. These pictures that you've been seeing are parts of my gardens. They do take a while to establish and they do change, but as long as you're aware that that's part of the process, you're going to be good to go. They do take a little bit of maintenance. Again, this is one of my gardens. There really is very little maintenance other than springtime cleaning up. I wander through observing constantly. So if I see something that might need to be done, I do that, but really it doesn't take much maintenance at all. And as we start this program tonight, I'm going to be making two assumptions. And one is that our species are targeting pollinator generalists who use almost any plant that's available. And, you know, your bumblebees are going to, most of your bumblebees are going to do this. Certainly honeybees are going to do this. Many pollinators are specific to certain plants, but I'm assuming that what we're going to be talking about tonight are the generalists who can tackle any of the plants that we put out there for them. The other thing that I'm going to assume is that we have plants that are going to bloom throughout the season because we have pollinators that appear early in the spring. We have other pollinators for the mid-summer months, and then we have pollinators that don't appear until later in the season. And so we need to provide bloom for them, nectar for them throughout the season. Okay, where to start? Site placement is a really important piece of the puzzle. And here's a couple of things that I think are important for you to consider when you consider where to put your pollinator garden. I think away from heavy traffic, certainly if you have areas that are right by the highway where those pollinators are going to be hit by the cars, that's not a preferable site. Preferably close to water because you will need to water that first year especially. And if you're too far away from your water source, it's going to become a chore and you don't want that. So somewhere where you have a hose, somewhere where you can get water to your plot. Also, most of these I'm sorry for the phone ringing. You want to probably have a sunny to a partial sunny site. Sorry, that'll stop in a minute. Most of our plants that are going to be pollinator friendly like sunny spots. They don't have to have full sun by any means. I consider full sun to be 6 hours. Anything over that is way full sun, but within 6 hours, you're in pretty full sun. Part sun is going to provide some moisture retention for plants, especially during that first year. So if you have an option for either completely sunny or partially sunny, I think partially sunny might be a good starting point. And then if you wanted to expand into the sunnier side of things, you can do that. I would not start in a very dark, shady spot. Most of the species that are in the free seed packets require sun, and you need a minimum of 4 hours for most of those. In proximity to other pollinator gardens, again, talking about corridors and pathways for pollinators to traverse, if that's possible. And also I would put your gardenator in your garden in a place where you frequent, in a place where you're going to be at, where you're going to observe, where you're going to enjoy being there, where you're going to see your plants, where you're going to see what's going to happen. Don't put it really far away from your house. Put it someplace where you'll see it, where the public will see it if possible, in a place that you enjoy being, especially. So real quickly, I'm just going to talk about a site assessment. This field of brome that you see is in Potomac. It's actually now my demonstration garden, but it's a very sunny place, but it has shade. You want to think about, okay, are the deer going to eat all my plants? Especially as young plants, the deer are going to come in and do that. Is this a place that the deer frequent? I do have to tell you that I had a deer path running directly through my garden when I started, and decided that wasn't a good idea after a while, and did fence it in. What is the weed situation? For example, here, smooth brome is considered a pasture grass, a forage grass to some, although it's not highly desirable to a lot of animals. But it is really essentially a weed. And I'm sure most of you have knapweed or you have other weeds. Getting to know what those weeds are is really important. And then getting to deal with them, we're going to talk about in a moment. Soil aggregation and compaction. Compaction is the #1 enemy of growing plants. Good soil is going to be 50% air and water. So the roots have to be able to penetrate and move. If you have an area where you've done construction, where heavy equipment has come in, or where you drive over it constantly, those areas are not going to be amenable to a pollinator plot unless you do some remediation. And then, of course, moisture. Is this a rocky, dry site, or is it does it have soil? And is it possible for some moisture retention? So going through those real quickly. Weeds, if you're not familiar with your weeds, I urge you to think about looking up the Montana Weed Control Association on the internet. They do have a number of guides, especially about noxious weeds. The Montana State University Extension Service also produces a booklet, which I really encourage you to ask for. It's called Weed Seedling Identification Guide. And as you have your little pollinator plants coming up, it's really important to know which ones are weeds and which ones are your pollinator plants. So that booklet, Weed Seedling Identification Guide, through the Montana State University Extension Service, is very helpful. So if you've got a lot of weeds, what are you going to do? The least destructive methods I consider to be those that minimize the disturbance to the soil. The least you can disturb the soil, the better, because then you're going to have less of the seed bank, which has already been established in this site, because the seeds have dropped from the plants and they're all laying there in the dirt waiting to germinate. The more you disturb the dirt, the more more seeds are going to sprout of your weeds. So ways you can deal with that are through mulches, and those can be things like newspaper. They can be taking the sod and turning it over and letting the roots just die. Like we have here. Mulches also can involve black plastic, cardboard sandwiches, where you put cardboard and then you put some earth on top of that to keep the cardboard down, and maybe even a little bit more cardboard, and just water that whole thing and let the cardboard soften and decay. These methods can take 6 months to a year to really start to be effective. Things like the black plastic, you have to get it really hot so that it really just cooks those weed seeds underneath. And the sod turning really needs to take quite a while to kill seeds underneath. Hand pulling is fairly effective for some weeds. Here pictured, you see the yellow flowered, I don't know if my cursor shows here, but The yellow tansy at the top is a noxious weed. It grows mostly along riparian areas. You can pull that to a certain extent. Seeds are its primary method of propagation. So you can do some pulling of that. But the second one down is bindweed. It looks like a morning glory. And if you pull that, all you're going to be doing is encouraging it to propagate through all of the little cut up rhizomes that remain in the soil. This is a very difficult plant to eradicate, and probably you won't ever totally eradicate it. My method of working with it is, yes, to pull it and pull it and pull it. And just every time I visit the garden, I pull it again. And you know, I have moderate success. Sometimes I do mulch over it to try and get it down, but it does tend to spread around. Yeah, it's just one of those plants that's there. So I try and work around it. Below is knapweed, and there's two plants, two pictures here. One, you can see the in flower. This is spotted knapweed, a Russian knapweed. And then you've got the little rosettes of it, the green rosettes. And these are very easy to pull very successfully when the soil is moist. So after a rain, you can pull those. And as long as you dig just down a little bit so that you get the root crown, you will have eliminated that plant. Biocontrols are another method that's great for reduction of weeds, the weevils, especially for knapweed. There are some biocontrols out there for spurge. Dalmatian toadflax, I believe there are also some biocontrols out there, and I'm not going to talk a lot about those, but you can certainly research those, and I'm sure Abby could give you some more information about that. More aggressive methods of getting rid of weeds are chemical herbicides, which I discourage simply because those herbicides remain in the soil. Even if they say that they are harmless, they stay there. And even some organic herbicides are pretty tough. You'll hit non-target species, and those will be killed as well as your target species. You know, that's not to say that I've never used them. I would say that I've used Roundup, especially on the smooth brome. I've tried to get rid of it through that and had some success with it. But there are also plots that I don't want to prepare for another year or two. I try and really, you know, let it return to nature a little bit after that application. Tilling, again, especially if you have compaction, you may have to till 6 inches, maybe to a foot even, to get that soil loosened up. Fire, you can see here in some of these pictures of my gardens, I have used fire as a method to try and get rid of most of the weeds so I can kind of start again. And this is one place where it's really helpful to know what your weed seedlings look like so you can address those as they come up. But it's also a good time to plant after fire, give it some moisture and get the seeds in there so that they get a good head start on the weeds. Preparing the soil, again, thinking about aggregate. If your soil is really compacted, you really need to turn it over either with a pitchfork or till it somehow so that you loosen it up. And then think about how you could build the soil so that it will hold moisture. Compost is a great additive to most of our soil. We can just add a little bit, maybe an inch or two on top and kind of turn that into the soil. And it really helps the moisture retention, the moisture holding capacity of the soil. If your soil is clay, really heavy clay, you may want to add in some gravel or some coarse sand to be able to make it drain a little bit better. Okay, moving right on to seedling. Do we have any questions at this point, Abby, on any of that? I know I'm going really fast.
Yes, just one. You kind of already answered it, but it was what remediation do you recommend for really compacted soils? So I believe you said tilling and then tilling pretty deep, like either 6 inches to a foot down. But if there's anything else you want to add.
I would just really encourage adding compost to that and really getting your moisture levels up. You know, again, if you think about soil being 50% water and air, that's your goal in trying to get that compaction all loosened up. And also keep in mind that when you've had compaction that's been there for a long time, that the soil microbiota has probably died because it hasn't been able to breathe. It hasn't been able to move and feed. So anything that you can do to improve the soil, especially with compost and microbes, that's really going to be helpful to any of your plants. Okay, what's the best time to seed? There are basically two best times, fall and spring. And it really just depends on the species of plants that you have. If you are planting native plants, probably about 75 to 80% of our plants require a long period of cold stratification, which is a cold, moist condition that they have to go through in order to break their dormancy. Excuse me. And then in the springtime, they will germinate. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that. If you're planting in the spring, many of the seeds that we get, you know, you think about vegetable seeds, you plant them and they come up. Well, not all seeds do that. And I don't know on the seed packets if it gives you some direction for this, but we do have a lot of seeds that are what we call non-dormant and will come up as soon as it gets to be about 70 degrees. So if you plant those really early in the spring, it may be too early. You want to wait until you start to get some really warm days where you can keep it watered, but it's really warm for spring planting. Fall planting is a little bit different. When you really want snow to cover up your seeds. And let me see, did I go? These are broadcasting methods. Let me go back. So when you plant in the fall, the really critical piece is going to be the spring. When the seeds have gone through that period of cold, moist conditions, then you need to keep them moist in order for them to germinate. And I know you see that on seed packets and you think, oh, yeah, I'll keep it moist. No, you really have to. If you think about that little seed starting to germinate, putting its roots into the soil, and then all of a sudden it dries out, it's desiccated, it's dead. Okay, you've got to keep it moist. I usually cover my seeds with a thin layer of pine needles or maybe even a thin layer of straw in order to help retain some of that moisture, but really be diligent about keeping your pollinator plot moist in the spring. For example, I'll just give you one little quick example, balsam root. You can plant balsam root seeds, just throw them out there, rake them in real gently in the fall. And then in the spring, you can't transplant them. So make sure they are where you want them to be. But then in the spring, keep them moist for, 2 to 3 weeks at least, more if you can be that diligent. And you will see them start to germinate as the spring warms up, and you'll have a whole crop of balsam root. So anyway, here is milkweed pictured here. Milkweed's one of those ones that needs to be 70 degrees in the springtime, and it needs light to germinate. So it's one that you would put on top of the soil and make sure that it has light. Now, that's not to say you can't throw a little bit of pine needle over it to protect it from predation by the birds and the mice and whatever. And I would certainly overly seed with milkweed, but it does need light to germinate. So there are lots of different requirements for different species, but that's a whole nother presentation. When you are seeding, and whether this is in the fall or the spring, broadcast seeding either by hand, where you just take handfuls of seed and throw them out, or using broadcast seeders, Either way, I would really encourage you to put some sand into the mixture so that it creates a pretty good, maybe several cups worth. Mix it all together with your seeds. Make sure that you've got a good distribution of the big seeds and the little seeds that fall down into the bottom, and then broadcast them so that you get some pretty equal distribution. Okay, reseeding. So maybe you've done your plot, you've had some success last year, and some things came up and some things didn't, and you decide, okay, I think I should reseed. Couple of things that you might consider. First of all, some seeds take an extra year to germinate. Just a thought. Another thought is maybe you did let it dry out. And if you did let it dry out, those seeds died and you will need to reseed. And again, because some things need fall seeding and some things need spring seeding, I actually think doing both is really important. Just again, it depends on the species that you're working with. How much seed? We have a tendency to overseed, and I don't know if the pollinator seed packets that you're receiving give you an area that the seeds will cover. But generally, you do want to be able to see your seeds. One of the things that happens with all of our seeds is that some are going to come up and bloom in the spring, some are going to come up and bloom in the fall, some are going to come up in the summer. So it's good to have a real dense plot. If you got it so that it was really too thick, you can thin it out. But I think, just really broadcasting so that if you looked at a 1-by-1 plot, I would think you would have, of tiny, tiny seeds, you could have like 20 or 30. Of the bigger seeds, you probably want to have, 10 or 15. So that's just a general guideline. So here are a couple of conditions that are important for successful reseeding. First of all, making the seeds are viable. And again, that's good. Coming from the conservation district, we're assuming that these seeds are viable. Moisture, 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 especially in the spring. Keep the plots moist, not wet, but moist. You want to think about, I sometimes dig down and see if I've got like at least 2 or 3 inches of moisture penetrating down. That's really important. And then you want to also see if it's just kind of washing through your soil and not staying on top. If that happens, you need to put some compost on there to hold the soil. But it's okay, just dig down and check and see what the soil is doing, so that as those little roots get down in there, they've got something to hold on to and some moisture to get. And again, that's soil aggregate. After you seed, be that in the fall or be that in the spring, when you cover a seed, only cover it to the depth of the seed. So some of our seeds are really, really tiny. So you only need a really, really light covering, and it might only take a little bit of sand over it, or a little teeny bit of compost. Some species, especially the seeds that are really, really tiny, you don't want to put soil on top of those. That's just too much. You want to gently tamp it down and then put the seeds maybe on top of that soil. And then you can I just take my hand and just sort of rub it over the soil, and that's plenty. A light mulch over your seeding once you're there. And again, both of these pictures show really heavy concentrations, both of straw and pine needles, which are too heavy. But I just wanted to show you the medium. So you just need a light covering, basically, so the birds don't see the seeds, and so that you retain some of the moisture and provide a little bit of shade for your seedlings. Oh yeah, even in the wintertime, if we get one of those periods where there's no snow and it's kind of dry, and especially if we get a lot of freezing and thawing, go out and water your plot. That desiccation during the winter can be just as deadly to the seeds as it drying out in the spring. So don't be afraid to give it some water. It certainly doesn't hurt. If everything's really frozen, you don't need to do that. But especially if you see any freeze thaw and it gets really warm, go ahead and water. Okay, weed seedlings. This is a picture of hound's tongue, which again is a noxious weed. And these are all little seedlings coming up. It really is important to know what those seedlings look like. And again, that weed seedling identification guide is really helpful. When to weed. So if I ended up with a plot looking like this, where I had all these little weed seedlings coming in, I would definitely weed it now. As soon as you can identify what the plant is, pull it, you can pull the weeds out. You don't want to get these so big that you can't tell, that you don't allow the other plants not to come up. Okay, so getting to know seedlings is really important. Okay, and now getting the plot to grow a little bit. Water. How much water do you need? Even a plant that when it's fully mature doesn't require any additional moisture than our 11 to 12 inches that we get here in Potomac. We are semi-arid. So a lot of our plants don't take much water at all. Even those plants are going to take more water as babies. If you want to have a successful pollinator plant, you've got to water them more frequently. And try and water in the morning if you have that option. That allows well, there's people that say water in the evening. If you water in the morning, you're going to avoid things like powdery mildew and some of the funguses that grow when you water at night. Those fungi seem to be able to multiply. So when you water in the morning, things dry out a little bit and they stay healthier. But if you water in the evening, then the plants get a good 12 hours of moisture before the sun comes up again. So there are benefits to both. I would say you have to monitor your plot because it's your soil and you know the sun and you have to monitor it. So you could have to water every single day. You could even initially have to water a couple of times a day if you've got a lot of drainage. And if I was in a situation where I was finding I had to water a couple of times a day, which I don't want to do, I would probably put more pine needles over it, or even some remay, which is like a frost cloth, because that will also be a sun protector. Think about things that you can put over it to provide a little bit of shade, even a piece of shade cloth. I sometimes drape shade cloth over. Okay, so this is a little plot here, and I was talking about how many seeds. If I put too many seeds in, am I going to have too many plants? Well, this is a place where I have too many plants. This is a plant called Scarlet Gilia. It's a wonderful, wonderful plant, native plant, and it's actually a biannual. So it's the beginning of its second year. It's just come through the winter, and now I have all these little rosettes that are going to grow into plants that can be up to 3 or 4 feet tall and covered with red flowers that the pollinators go crazy for. But I've got too many of them here. So at this point right here, when the rosettes are about this big, it's a good time for me to go in with my spade. A hori-hori knife is my best tool. If you don't know what a hori-hori knife is, an H-O-R-I, you can go to any hardware store, and in the garden section, you'll find them. They're a Japanese tool. They are wonderful tools. Anyway, you can just dig up your plants, making sure you get the entire root, transfer them to a moist hole, and plant them back in again. Anyway, okay. So when the season gets going, you can continue, especially the first season, I do like to continue to water to really get the roots established. Once you've got the roots established, your plant's going to be good. Even if you end up with a really hot, dry season, if those plants are established and they senesce, they totally go to sleep in August or September, it's okay because they'll come back next year. Monitoring, you really just want to keep an eye on things, see what's happening in there, and look for your pollinators, look for caterpillars, look for egg sacs. Really pay attention to what's going on in there. It's really fun. Here are some things to consider. You notice that when I was talking about maintenance on my gardens, I didn't say anything about fall maintenance. That's because I don't do much fall maintenance. If I have something, some branch on a shrub that has died or something, I'll certainly take that out. But I try and leave most of my plants as overwintering habit. On the far right here, we have a picture of the mourning cloak, which is the Montana state butterfly. And it's one of the butterflies that overwinters as an adult. So it's looking for brush piles and places where there are dead stems down for it to germinate. On the left, you'll see the Prometheus moth cocoon. Here's the Prometheus moth in the middle, and it's a gorgeous moth, great big huge thing. And I put my hand here so you can see the size of it, and it likes to grow on aspen twigs or just on real straight fine twigs. But if you have those twigs in your garden, you can leave them and leave the seeds for, well, you may have rodents and things that come in. You may have chipmunks, you may have little mice and whatnot, but it also is food for the birds during the winter months. I do, especially if you have a plot that's in the public eye, it's a real consideration about whether or not you do this, because you really want to have the public think that we've got a really good thing going here, not that we're making a big mess. So you can prune judiciously, but I would, again, try and lay things kind of low and provide cover for our pollinators. I do, again, go in and pull weeds in the fall. Keeping in mind that as I disturb this soil, pulling up the weed, that I may be actually planting some of my desirable plants by sort of pulling up the soil as I do this. And again, I water well before freeze up, try and get that moisture in there. And you can see these are actually pots in the ground that are pictured here, but I do cover things over any place where I've got bare ground for the germinating seed. So, I do cover it with pine needles. That said, as I was just thinking about that, it's really important to leave some completely bare areas in your plot if you can, especially if they're on a little hillside. Many of our bees are solitary bees that live in bare spots. I'm sure that if you start looking at little hillsides, you'll see there's a lot of little teeny holes in those hillsides, and those are solitary bees that are making their nests in there. In the spring, again, talking about maintenance, that's when you can go for it. You can really start cleaning things up, cutting things down, cut off all of the dead vegetation. I don't fertilize my plants, especially the native plants, because I find that doing so promotes more growth than they really should have. And that often, especially if you fertilize midsummer or whatnot, that those plants won't calm down and go to sleep before freeze up. And we have pretty early freeze up sometimes. And if you catch the plants before they senesce, they can sustain a lot of systemic damage. Okay, so I think I'm about at 45 minutes, and I think that should leave me about 15 minutes. So I'm going to stop the share here and, oops, go back to there. I think, so can you see, can people see me now?
Yes, they can just.
I'm never sure.
Yeah, no, and thank you, Kathy. That was so wonderful. We do have a few questions, but I did just want to say, sorry, I'm looking over here at this chat box. One of our attendees, Zen, shared a
yes, thank you, Zen.
Of the weed seedling ID guide. So thank you, Zen. I'm gonna share that to everyone. So that's
Yeah.
an online version of the guide. So thank you. That's wonderful. But we do have a few questions. Someone was asking, what can they do to mitigate mouse predation?
Get a cat. No. Sometimes I do have serious problems, mostly with voles, not with mice. The mice are looking for grain, they're looking for seeds, and they will certainly come after your things. But I have more trouble with voles because they tunnel, they take the seeds and they bury them in their little burrows and whatnot, and they actually eat the roots of the plants, which is more harmful. It's more like what pocket gophers do. And I actually will put out spring traps. And I look for where their runs are, and I put out spring traps. And my neighbor is raptor rehab person, and I take my little mice bag of mice over to my neighbor. But that said, it is a problem, and I'm being a little facetious about cats because I really, cats actually do a very good job of mice control, but they also kill a lot of our little rodents, our chipmunks and our squirrels and rabbits and other things. So it's a problem. I really don't like using the pesticides, the chemicals that you use. If you do decide you're going to use barbate or something like that, please put it inside of, take a can, like either a Coke can that you've taken an end off of, or a tin can, and put them inside there, because otherwise the birds come down, because there's grain embedded in those blocks, and you don't want the birds to come down and get those. And then they eat the barbate, and then they go back to their nest and die. But the spring traps, I actually like the plastic ones better than the old-fashioned wooden ones with the copper, because I find that the copper just doesn't do very well after a while. But the mice do get smart, so you have to kind of change the bait every now and again. But yeah, that's what I do. Anybody else have any other suggestions? You might add that into the chat if you've got something else that works better.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's great. Thank you. Another question someone asked, which Kathy, let me know if you want me to take this one, but they asked, do people put sand in the mix in a no-till seed drill? And the Lake County Conservation District has a no-till seed drill. I actually personally don't do the reservations with that one. We rent it out to folks. But I just recently asked when I saw that message come in, I asked a coworker, and they said, they actually wouldn't be surprised if people do. We typically recommend mixing sand in with the mixes when you're hand broadcasting or using one of those grinders that you kind of saw in that photo that Kathy had. Because I know the no-till seed drills, you can kind of set the rate of like what they are broadcasting as you go. But I don't know if people put sand in it, because the sand kind of helps just see where you're actually like broadcasting the seed out, and sort of like helps mix things up. But yeah, I'm kind of checking in on that right now, and we'll get back to you. But Kathy, did you have anything you wanted to add to that one?
No, I would say that most people don't usually do that. But again, I think it's, especially if you were using a mixture of seeds where you had a lot of little seeds mixed in with big seeds, then it would make more sense to try and use some sand maybe in with the drill, just so that you don't end up with a heavy concentration of all those little seeds at once. But other than that, I can't really address that.
Yeah. Okay. The next question is, someone was saying that their land is mostly wild, that they have a pollinator, or they planted a pollinator plot near their garden, and they said, what is the best way to remediate the wildland surrounding the pollinator plot? They also were just saying pollinator, so I'm not sure if that means that this question was submitted anonymously. So whoever submitted this question, I'm not sure if that means you have bees or if you planted you have pollinators near your garden. But they were wondering if they should cover things up during the winter with straw and pine needles. They're like their active plot.
So are we're talking about the wildland around the plot? I mean, it sounded like the question was about remediating the area around the plot.
Yeah, I think there's a couple questions. So it seems like there's two. They were wondering if they should cover their pollinator plot during the winter with straw and pine needles. Like after it's
if you're leaving all of the dead stuff there, you don't need to do that.
okay, cool. And then their second question was, what is the best way to remediate the wildland surrounding the pollinator?
I guess I don't. So maybe the question is about remediating the weeds around the plot. I'm going to assume that that's what you're meaning. And I would say that it would be very important not to use chemicals if you're going to be trying to do any remediation around your plot. Be really careful about spray, because overspray is going to affect your pollinator plot. Any kind of chemicals, that can seep through the moisture in the ground are going to do that. Yeah, I would pull most of and it again depends on the species of weeds that you've got. If you've got a huge area, certainly, yeah, go. Maybe the question is about providing wildland vegetation still around the pollinator plot, which would be great. I mean, I guess I'm confused because to me, wildland assumes that there is a fairly strong native component to your vegetation around your area. And so I don't want to remediate that. I want to keep that as healthy as possible. So I really want to encourage that. So I'm sorry if I'm not understanding your question.
No worries. So they sent in some clarifying things. They said, yes, they do have bees, and they were wondering, remediate in the sense that to keep noxious weeds away.
Okay.
So, yeah, thank you. I think you did answer that. And thank you for more information, whoever submitted that question. Let's see, the next question, which, this is an interesting one. I was actually going to ask this too, because I get asked this a lot. So this person wants to turn their whole field or a large field into flowers. How would they suggest controlling weeds in a very large field?
Yeah, that is not an easy job, but it is, and it will take a long time, but it is doable. The first thing you have to do is probably spend, I would say, a year or two dealing with the weeds. And that is up to you how you choose to do that. If you did a chemical application, again, I would really be thinking about the longevity of any of those chemicals in the soil. And keep in mind that when you get rid of the plants, that is not getting rid of the weed seeds. So what you're going to have to do is probably till the soil. And this is what I would do. I would till the soil. I would let everything on top die. I would probably till it again. And again, anything that comes up, let it die. And then I would start watering it and let all those things start germinating again. You could even at that point put in a green manure, which is a plant that's an annual plant that's going to provide nitrogen for the soil. And I'm not going to go into green manures here, but Abby can do that. I might actually plant that and let that work its way in, just so I'm creating microbiota in the soil. And so I'd let things grow up, and then I'd till it again in the fall, to say. And then probably the next spring, after I raked it or hoed it, or whatever implements you have for a field, I would probably smooth that over. And you don't have to roll it. You don't have to have it real hard at all. You can still have it fairly torn up a little bit. That's okay. And then you might think about starting to plant. And again, you have to read your field. You have to read and see, how am I doing on my weeds? If I still got, it depends on what you've got. If you've got leafy spurge, you've got a couple of years going. It's not going to happen in 1 year. If you've got knapweed and you're real diligent, you can tackle it after a year. If you've got Dalmatian toadflax, you can probably do that after a year or two. The less aggressive weeds you can handle, but keep in mind that the more work you do is in preparation, the easier it's going to be for you to grow flowers. Okay. So once you plant it again, I would try a light mulch, and I'd keep the water going, just like you would if you're doing a hay crop. You want to keep it watered, especially for the first year. During the second year, you can back off. Third year, forget it. It's established. But it's a work of love. But what a wonderful thing that is, to think about having a wildflower meadow. My personal bias is to really include a lot of natives, because we're wanting to include, again, not only species for our generalists, but species for our specialists as well. And so investigate what plants will grow well in your area that are going to provide for a lot of different pollinators. And go for that. You might want to think about putting up bee nests around your field. Might think about creating areas where you've got brush piles for those morning cloaks and other pollinators that want some habitat. And then you've got to make some decisions too about what you're going to do in the fall. I would probably mow. If you're going to just do wildflowers, then you could mow it down in the fall. But a lot of our plants don't necessarily need to be mowed down. And if you could leave them for the pollinators and for creatures as habitat, I think it could be beautiful. Because what's going to happen in the spring is those flowers are all going to come up, and they will naturally overcome all of the dead stuff. So you won't be seeing the dead stuff once the new plants arise. But I'd be willing to talk more with you about that if you wanted to know. But that's just kind of a general thing of what I would do. I would get that stuff out, let stuff grow, water, let it grow, and then start.
Thank you. Yeah. So we do have a few more questions in the chat box, but I see one of our participants has raised their hand. So I think they might have a question. So,
Zen.
Yes, yeah. And I saw, so Susan had your hand up, and I'm not sure if that was a question. I see Zen's got their hand up, so I'm gonna, no worries. Zen, I'm gonna allow you to talk here.
Oh, thank you. I did that to myself. I actually wasn't expecting to be vocal. I'm trying to establish a xeric garden, which low water use, although you have to have water to get started, alongside pollinators. You mentioned at the top of the session about a subsidy for local shrubs. I'm curious to learn more about that because it's not particularly easy to find nurseries that actually have local shrubs that could fit into a xeric garden. Could you give some more information?
Yeah, so I'm not particularly sure what type of xeric garden, if I'm pronouncing that right.
Oh, drought resistant or drought tolerant. So we're not talking green grass for lawns or anything like that. I have watered knapweed for a year. That's another disaster with a master gardener program, but we'll get over that. But the xeric approach is something I grew up with, using grey water and fostering plants and shrubs that are actually very healthy during low rainfall areas, because we had water restrictions here this year, which was a surprise for me. So I'm going xeric. I've dug up the lawn. I'm putting in pollinators, but I'm really curious about access to these shrubs.
So Zen, are you full sun?
Yes.
Okay. So are you familiar with which species would be appropriate for shrubs for that? Is that what you're,
yeah.
I could help you with that.
Yeah, if you want to share some names, the names are all a bit strange to me. I saw something about like rubber rabbit bush.
Rubber rabbit brush.
And there are many others that just crack me up. But that's what I'm after is, first of all, the combination of leaves and flowers. The palette is beautiful, but it's more on that xeric side where once you get them established, full sun, I don't have to be out there every other night watering, or I could put in a drip irrigation and just turn it on like once a week, something like that. I also compost like crazy. We call it pea straw. It's the same thing, pine needles or straw, really to stop the evaporation during the summer months for watering. So yeah, those shrubs, what names would you suggest?
Okay, well, I would actually do some sagebrush because they are actually quite ornamental. I would think about doing maybe some silver buffalo berry.
Ooh, never heard of that one.
Okay. You know, and as I was thinking about it, I think the big difficulty that you have, Zen, is actually obtaining the plants. And the Center for Native Plants in Whitefish is probably a good source. And you may have to kind of go with what they've got. If they've got native plants and you ask them specifically for xeric plants, and then I'm not sure how that's going to tie in with what Abby's doing on the cost share, but that's one, and whether they're limiting the places where you can purchase things from, but they would be good. And there's a whole plethora of native plants that grow in that don't necessarily even have to be shrubs. Anyway, and just to save time, I would recommend to you to go to my website, which is blackfootnativeplants.com, and do some searching for xeric. There's a whole list of xeric plants and xeric shrubs. So that would help you. So the Center for Native Plants is one place. There is a place down in Hamilton, but it's only wholesale. And I don't know how Abby, you want to deal with that, but I would certainly recommend that you go through a friendly retailer and ask them to purchase plants from there as part of your deal. I'm not sure, I may be speaking totally out of turn, but they do some wonderful shrubs down there as well. The other things then is maybe to think about, I don't know if you ever get further east, like to Bozeman or whatever, but those further eastern communities are going to have more demand for those kinds of plants than we do here on the So there's a oh dear, I'm drawing a blank. Cashman Nursery in Bozeman also has a very nice selection, and just ask for the native plant section. Denise Montgomery is the person in charge there and is very knowledgeable about native plants and shrubs and can help you out with those. But you're right, there's a wonderful palette of xeric plants and they are very good for pollinators. For example, that rubber rabbit brush, that is covered with pollinators because it's late season and there's not stuff out there blooming. And so it's just gorgeous. Yeah.
So
anyway.
there's 2 bushes on a vacant block across the road, and I'm just waiting for the full moon so I can drive over and dig them up. And
Well, no. You don't need to do it. It's not that hard, Zen. So just go over there when they're starting to get looking all fluffy.
Yep.
Go just gather up some seeds and take and where you want them to grow. Again, you just put them out over the soil. They need light to germinate.
Okay.
Okay. So actually, this is sort of a funny story. I had gathered a whole bunch of rabbit brush seeds one fall and had them in a brown paper bag, just a little sandwich bag on my deck, my porch deck. And the wind came and blew them away. And I didn't know it. And so in the spring, I went to the gardens that are the lilac garden that's right below my deck. And here's this paper bag. And I'm thinking, what is in this? So I open it up and here are all of these rabbit brush seeds fully germinated, all ready to go. It was like, oh yeah, this works. So you can actually get a lot of germinants really easily from rabbit brush. They don't, I really, for all of you online, I really want to encourage you not to dig plants from the wild. Sometimes it works, but more often than not, we're just killing our populations. So yeah, just do the seeds. It's easy. Just go get that fluff.
It's probably less of a civic violation too. So.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, yeah, well, thank you, everyone, for that question and answer. Yeah, and we actually have another LCCD staff member tuning in, and Sarah's been mentioning in the chat that we will be having partners with Great Bear Nursery down in Hamilton, and then other.
That's the one I was talking about.
Oh, excellent. Okay. And then some other local nurseries too, around the area. There's quite a few. The Tribal Nursery grows a lot of great native shrubs. Just right now with COVID, their availability is kind of just here and there with who's staffing. So sometimes it's hard to get a hold of folks. And the
other thing that I need to interject here. The other thing that's really important is to let them know as soon as possible that this is even possibly coming up down the line, because they have to gather the seeds and then they have to grow them if you're going to have them for next year. So they need to be out there now collecting the seeds in order to have them next year. It doesn't just happen. So get in touch with them ASAP.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so another question sort of similar to this one, so I'm going to ask this first, but they were wondering, this person has silver buffalo berries and they just they seem to be struggling with them a bit. Do you have any recommendations on how to support that kind of shrub that might be struggling?
More water. Yeah, generally, because buffalo berry, a lot of times you find in the burrow ditches. So it likes ephemeral water. It likes that spring water. So I would say in the spring. So yeah, so a lot of our plants in Montana, a lot are ephemeral. So what they look for is those springtime rains, for springtime inundation, and then they're getting their moisture from that, and they work and get more root growth so that they can put out their plants, their leaves. But then they know that they're not going to get very much later on. And buffalo berry tolerate some pretty hot, dry situations, but it usually is in ephemeral places where it needs more water in the spring.
Okay, thank you. And then someone was wondering that sort of remediation to like a very like large weedy field, if someone wanted to plant like a larger like flower field, they were wondering if you would recommend that same procedure to get rid of foxtail.
What's wrong with foxtail? No. So foxtail is actually a native species. I know that the awns are very problematic for wildlife, for cattle, for dogs, etc. It is a very short-rooted, fibrous plant and very, very easy to pull. Tilling, I think, would probably do a lot of damage to it. So yeah, I think you don't have to do much with that. It's a pretty easy one to get rid of. I mean, you see it in those really dry, gravelly places alongside the road. And if you are creating a situation where the soil is tilled, where you have moisture, where it's not just gravelly compacted, then the foxtail's not going to be so happy there. If you look and see where those plants grow, really start looking at the soil around them, and you'll start seeing, oh, that's where that plant likes to grow. Oh, that one likes to be over there in a little bit of shade. Oh, that one likes to be in the ditch. So you just start to see those conditions that those plants like. And foxtail likes to be in roadways. So it likes heavy compacted stuff. So my guess is that your field is compacted, that it has probably a lot of gravel or soil or rocks or something. And so, yes, that same procedure of tilling, I would really encourage you to till in some green manure crops to really start rebuilding that soil. I don't know if you have the opportunity to get manure from somebody, but get some really well composted manure and start and broadcast that over your area, work that in. And yeah, foxtail won't be a problem.
Okay. Great, thank you. We have one more question here in the Q&A box, and then I can clarify a little on that no-till seed drill after. But someone was wondering, how many plants per square foot should they thin to?
It depends on the species. So if you have, because what happens is, let me give you an example. Within a 1 foot plot, you might have a pasque flower, you might have a blanket flower, and you might have a rigid goldenrod. And so in the spring, in that 1 foot plot, your pasque flower is going to come up. And then it's going to kind of senesce. And then the blanket flower is going to start coming up. And then it's going to get really big. And about the time the blanket flower is done, then the rigid goldenrod is going to come up. Ideally, that's what you want in your pollinator garden, because you want stuff to be blooming all the time. Again, the seed mix may not give you exactly that, but that would be something that you could continue to add to your pollinator garden by doing your own research. So the short answer is, I would probably start with 3. And that's just, because even if you had 3 plants that were all going to be at the same time, it would give you a really nice show. But if you had 3 plants that were at different times, you would still get pretty good show from all 3 of them. You know what I'm saying? So it really is species dependent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the free pollinator seed mix we give out does have staggered seasons of the species in them. So we did kind of plan for that, but yeah, no, thank you. And then, so that was our final question from the Q&A, but just to clarify about the no-till drill, sorry, I'm looking down here at my message. Yeah, the no-till drills used primarily just for broadcast seeding. If you put sand in the mix. It might just settle out, I guess, in where the seed is put into the drill. So I'm not sure, yeah, how effective that might be. I think you can potentially try some other things to mix in that might be a little bit lighter. But yeah, that's that's my information for you about the no-till drill. The sand might settle, but if you have something maybe lighter than sand, that might work better. Yeah, well, that I think is going to wrap up our questions, and we are definitely at time. So, Kathy, I just want to say thank you so much for all your knowledge and your time and your information. This was really wonderful. Yeah.
You are very welcome.
Okay, great. So yeah, like Kathy was mentioning, you can find a lot of resources that you've provided and your contact info on the was it Blackfoot Nursery?
Blackfoot Native Plants.
BlackfootNativePlants.com. Yes. Okay, great. Oh, there's just some folks saying thank you in the chat. So yes, thank you everyone for tuning in. And yes, thank you, Kathy, one more time. And I hope everyone has a really lovely evening. And yes, happy planting. Good luck, everyone. All right, bye.
Okay, bye-bye.